there was a few things I missed out on the control structure lesson previously, so just revisiting that. So control structures really have three different constructs. So that means that in terms of programming, we use three different ways that we can control how the program flows through. So the first one is the most basic, is sequential, yeah, or is in sequence. And sequential just means that the program runs through from line by line, starting from the very top, going through to the bottom of the code. Yeah, so it goes through line by line. And what this means that it can run all of the block of code, yeah, as a sequence, and that's why it's called sequential. We also have a conditional, which you had the lesson previous about that. The key point here is that we use conditional to determine what block of code will be executed, depending if a condition is met or not. So if a condition is met, then we can execute a certain block of code. Or if that condition is not met, then we can also use an else statement to determine an alternative block of code that could run instead. And then we have lastly iteration. Iteration, as the name might suggest, someone might say, can you reiterate that? Can you reiterate? So that's where the word iteration also comes in from. And so iteration just means the idea of looping. This reduces the need to rewrite the same instructions over and over again. So imagine you're trying to work out the area of, let's say, a rectangle, the area of a square, and so on and so forth. So if you had a loop that would just be pass some data that can execute all of those automatically, as opposed to writing a code to do each one. Okay, so that's the benefit of iteration. It saves you time from having to rewrite the same instructions. And looping is one of the fundamental things really with programming. So just wanted to make sure you're clear about that. So the three different programming constructs, or in other words, control structures, are sequencing, or otherwise sequential. What you need to remember about that is that it executes line by line. Then the next one is conditional. Basically, think of if else statements, yeah, if then else or else if statements. An iteration, think of loops, while loop or for loop, yeah, iteration. All right, so here's a question related to that. So there's a question saying, identify the control structure of Oscar's pseudocode and describe how this would affect the way the code is executed. Now here is the pseudocode here. Now what you've been asked to do is identify the control structure for that and a description, so of how it would affect the code. Now you'll notice here there's nothing's been indented, so straight away the code is going to be running from beginning to end. So you should be able to work out what kind of control structure that is based on what we spoke about in the previous slide. So it starts from the beginning, it doesn't branch off, and it doesn't go into a sub program, it just flows all the way through. And then the description, again, think about how that would affect the code. Literally by explaining what that one is, that would give you the answer. Again, take your time, answer that question, and that would have given you 3 marks. So your description of what it is will give you 2 marks, and your control structure by identifying that would have given you 1 mark. All right, so I would suggest you pause this here. I would review the answer just now. So the answer here is that it's sequential, or you could say linear, but sequential is what I would prefer that you write in your exam. That will give you the 1 mark. And then all lines of code are executed. Yeah, that will give you another mark. And they are executed in order from the first line to the last line, or as it says here, you can accept line by line. Okay. And then lastly, without the use of a selection or iteration. So it's executing the whole thing, and it doesn't use selection or iteration in this case because we're not using an if statement, we're not using a loop. So that is the answer to that question. Hopefully that helps you understand control structures a little bit more. So yeah, I would leave this here and we'll come back to the next lesson after.